All right, it is Dog Walk Talk time, joined by Jake Roos, Palmer Toms. Hope everyone had a happy Easter, Passover, and G-Day, not necessarily in that order. Guys, we had a great fantasy football G-Day roster draft, and it wasn't as beautiful as the Dogs' new championship rings, but I think it was a big success. And today, on this episode, we're going to go through y'all's roster, not everybody. We'll just do the top, skill players. We'll treat it like a real fantasy deal. We can't really grade out offensive linemen necessarily. I'm not an expert that's qualified to do that. But let's take a big look at how y'all did. What are your first thoughts, Roos, Palmer? How do you think you did going back and watching G-Day and keeping in mind which players you drafted?
I thought I was amazing. I knew I would be. I mean, I told you from the get-go that I was going to beat Palmer, and I did. That's what happened. So overall, no, I felt like overall, some of the guys that I went with, kind of showed out, and for the reasons that I hoped they would. Oscar Delp was the guy we thought he would be coming into that game. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is a guy who in year 2 looks like he's primed for breakout, and I think will be a major factor over the course of this season. I think you saw that early on. Nyland Green and Javon Bullard, I thought both had good games too. So that was encouraging, and really that's encouraging for the depth at defensive back. I think Palmer got me with Eric Gilbert, but I felt good with my I still felt good about my Delp pick. Overall, I think that I thought it was a pretty evenly balanced matchup. And, I think for Georgia, it was a great showcase to get some of those young guys out there and kind of let you know, that they are still in good hands. And for me, it was a little weird watching the game because I almost felt that the offense was ahead of the defense, and that's not been the case for some time.
No,
it is G-Day, so.
They absolutely were ahead of the defense, and that feels like it's been the case all spring long. I think the biggest miss of our draft would be, on my part, not taking Carson Beck. Neither of us taking Carson Beck. I chose Brock Vandegrift over Carson Beck, and ultimately, Beck had the better day on the stat sheet. Brock looked a little bit uncomfortable, whereas Beck looked, very comfortable in that third string role. But overall, I thought my roster had a really strong day as well. Kendall Milton getting in the end zone through the air, the only running back to do so. Really, none of the running backs had a huge impact, on the game. Dejan Edwards did have 2 touchdowns, but it was from 3 yards out and 10 yards out. I think any three of those running backs could have.
Buddy. They all count the same. Mm-hmm. They all count the same, my friend.
Yeah. To me, I felt like any of those running backs could have punched those in. Overall, my receivers had a better day. A.D. Mitchell and Ladd McConkey combined for 3 catches, I believe. Kearis Jackson had more than that alone as he led the entire team in receiving yards. Arian Smith had a big day through the air with his 60-yard reception. I felt like both of us had really strong tight ends, and that was kind of the theme of that game in general, was Georgia in the strength that they have at that tight end position. Gilbert and Delp both showing out, and obviously they've got guys behind them as well, or really ahead of them, that weren't able to play this spring in Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington. Like we said, I think it's tough to grade out the offensive line. A lot of that is done as a unit, but I think overall both sides had a pretty strong day on the offensive line. One thing that I did notice with your team, Roos, was just some of the injuries. Some of those guys that you picked that weren't able to play. Robert Beal, Tramel Wildthour.
Yep.
Neither of them played. Kamari Lassiter didn't play. So that was definitely limiting your defense. I didn't think that either secondary had a great day. But overall, I felt like, and Wes would know this sitting next to me in the box. I kept saying, "Oh, that's a Team Tom's guy right there. That's a Team Tom's guy."
Yeah, stop talking about it.
I felt like it was a strong day for Team Tom's, and overall, I think it was a strong day. for the Georgia offense, and with that offense showcasing the passing game, I felt like my pick of Jackson, Kyrus Jackson, Eric Gilbert, Arian Smith, all three of those guys had a big day through the air. Kendall Milton had a touchdown through the air as well. So I felt very strong about the performance of my team.
So you bring up the secondary, how much they were tested, and really how neither secondary looked that great. I think it was kind of a byproduct of how pass-heavy they scripted this game to be. Georgia's not going to pass it as much as they did. I don't know if maybe they will, but we're just not used to seeing Georgia be that pass heavy and the running backs be that little of a factor. But again, very impressive work from the offense. They did their job. They can't help, what kind of situations the secondary happen to be in or not be in. And Todd Monken showed the ability for his offense to get the ball in the hands of a lot of different playmakers. I'm looking at the stat sheet right now as I kind of tabulate how you guys did. Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton, Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett, all with rushing attempts. But then look at receiving. Kyrus Jackson, Kenny McIntosh, Gilbert, Rosmy Jacksaint, Seether, AD, Kendall Milton, Ladd McConkey, CJ Smith, like a lot of guys, Arian Smith, Jackson Meeks, all these guys getting touches in the game. And if that's any indication of Monken's offense in the regular season, I think it bears out, part of what we've talked about in previous episodes about why a guy like Burton would transfer to Alabama, because it's not necessarily a system to this point anyway. Maybe they make drastic changes in the regular season where one guy is the main receiving target or one guy is the main rushing attempt maker. Like, everyone touches the ball in this offense, and it makes it really dangerous.
Yeah, I think so too. And, they talked about it on the broadcast. I know you guys were both there, but, the ability of this team, you could line up 4 tight ends, and I think it would be very difficult for anybody to stop it because you've got a lot of guys who can function in this system in ways that tight ends traditionally don't. Delp is one of those guys. Gilbert's one of those guys. We know Bowers is one of those guys. We've seen Darnell Washington be one of those guys. Brett Seether on Saturday was one of those guys. So, it's honestly kind of absurd. I don't even understand how you keep this many good tight ends around. Somebody, it feels like, has to be odd man out at some point. I don't know who that'll be or when that will happen or if it will. But at some point, you've got to think that one of these guys has to be looking over his shoulder and saying, hey, how do I fit into all of this? Because there's a lot of mouths to feed when it comes to that room. Good problem to have for Georgia, but bad if you're a guy, 4th, 5th on that list.
Well, Roos, and you know this as well as anybody on this podcast here, but Georgia has 2 tight ends committed in the class of 2023, and only one that really realistically could leave after this season, and that being Darnell Washington, because Brock Bowers is going to be there. Eric Gilbert probably going to be there unless he has an incredible season and decides to leave after 3. I think that it's a problem. It's like you said, it's a good problem to have, but it's a problem that's not going away anytime soon. And I think that's a testament to what Todd Hartley is doing with that room and on the recruiting trail. A testament to what Todd Monken is doing with this offense, getting that position involved, and a testament to what Kirby Smart is able to sell with this program. The opportunity for multiple mouths to be fed each and every Saturday.
All right, guys. So here's what we got so far. Looking at your players, Roos, I think it is clear that Palmer had the better team, just based on performance from the top 10 draft picks. If we're going fantasy style, A.D. Mitchell, only 2 receptions for 28 yards. Jalen Carter was a big star on defense, had a sack, broke up a pass. But then, other than Delp, huge receiving target, 7 catches for 91 yards. As Palmer mentioned, Beal couldn't go. Lassiter couldn't go. Ladd McConkey, surprising, only had 1 catch. Jalen Walker did have a tackle for loss. That was a good pickup. Stetson strong quarterback performance out of the two. No one picked Carson Beck. So, yeah, pretty underwhelming day for Team Roos. On the flip side, Palmer's top 10 picks, Keely Ringo, had 4 tackles, really good pass breakup on a target to McConkey, I believe. Was that who
it was to
covering?
McConkey, and the fact that AD and him were both so limited is a testament to what Ringo was able to do.
I don't know if it was all Ringo, not to take anything away from him. I'm purely taking it away from your draft selection expertise. It just seemed like they weren't necessarily drawing things up for the guys that were proven commodities. Is that a tinfoil hat take?
No, I mentioned that in my, write up of the team that, I thought that AD Mitchell would probably be limited. I mean, I don't think that there's a lot of need to go to him 9 times like you do an Oscar Delp or anybody else. I mean, whoever, is leading the team. You know what AD Mitchell can do. You've seen it, right? I mean, it's not necessarily a situation where he's in a prove-it mode. I think a lot of these guys in G-Day who are successful are in that mode. They're in that, got to get out there, earn my stripes, earn my spot. I think we all know and all feel, I do anyway, and I would assume you guys do as well, AD's number 1, wide receiver 1 going into this year, and I don't think anybody's going to unseat him for that. So I thought that was a possibility. I knew that when I was drafting, but such is life. The real thing that I'm sad that we didn't get to see, honestly, now going back and knowing what we know now, and I'm sure we'll get to very shortly, I wish we could have seen Amarius Mims take part in G.
We'll get to Mims.
I would really.
We'll get to Mims later on.
I would have really liked to have seen him. I would have liked to have seen what he could have done in that opportunity. Ernest Green, I thought had a great day for a young offensive lineman. Looked like he was winning some battles when he had some opportunities. So I mean, it was a good showing for a lot of those guys, the young guys. Like I said, the prove it guys. You feel good coming out of this, looking at what Georgia's got in the future, I think.
War McClendon was asked about Amarius Mims, and this was before we knew that Mims was going to come back to Georgia after dipping his toe in the transfer portal and the waters of Tallahassee and Miami. But he was asked what was it like to compete with Mims and basically hold him off, and he gave some pretty good insight to that. He said, hey, it is what it is, man. Like, we were competing, and I'm just doing my job. He was just doing his. And Mims apparently felt like he still has a shot, still feels like Georgia's the place for him. And we'll get to Mims talk, of course, because it's our biggest story of the week, even bigger than anything that came out of G-Day. Really quick to summarize, Palmer's team, Keely Ringo, 4 tackles, 1 pass breakup. Gilbert, 3 receptions, 49 yards. 2 of those receptions, though, were touchdowns, and one of them, Kirby thought in real time that Stetson was trying to throw the ball away. I don't know. Going back and watching it, it looks like he really did put it where he needed to. And from our vantage
Stetson
point,
said that too.
Yeah,
Stetson said that too. That they were trying to. That it was more of a situation where, Gilbert was working on a different route concept than what they ended up running, but the defensive back had his back turned, and that they ended up going to him, with that opportunity. Not necessarily a situation where he was completely throwing it away, but it wasn't designed that way.
Yeah,
and I will say my big takeaway from G-Day, Eric Gilbert. Glad to see him out there, man. Just in general. I mean,
in general,
regardless
100%.
of what he was able to do. I mean, even if the kid had just been standing on the sidelines with a helmet on, that would have been great to see. To see him kind of get back there and see the form, that you have expected of him for so long, hope that he would get back to. I mean, let's be real. There was a time when we weren't really even concerned about football when it came to this young man, and so I think that it's exciting to see him. And like Terrence Edwards said, and go check out that piece West wrote with him. He looked like he had his joy back. He was smiling big. He was jumping, laughing. I mean, he seemed like he was really back in his own.
And he was in physical shape. And I know the TV broadcast crew pointed out some things that we had heard just about how big he'd gotten and how much weight he'd put on as part of the struggles that he was going through. And he has clearly done what it takes with Georgia's medical staff to get in a good place between the ears, in his heart, it seems like, with the joy that you mentioned, Jake, and to get down to where that ball was on that touchdown, probably the most impressive catch he made. Not that he made a ton of them, but he made a huge impact on the game. Who else did you have, Palmer? Warren McClendon, Pop Dumas Johnson, 7 tackles. What a force, man.
And going to be moving forward. I think, I mean, that was a clear win for Palmer, even at the moment when he drafted him. I mean, the kid is absolutely LB1 in my opinion. Moving into this fall, I don't see anybody unseating him. Really, the question becomes who's going to be his running mate back there, and I think Georgia still does have a question to answer with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had Tresman, and I thought Tresman had a strong day. Nearly an interception on Stetson there. Believe it was early in that game.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought Tresman had a good look on the defensive side of the football. Jalen Walker and Xavier Sori working together on that second team. A talented grouping, but certainly inexperienced young pairing there. And it just went to show, as soon as you got past those 4, it was a ton of walk-ons in there. And so Georgia needs to get healthy in that inside linebacker room. They need Ryan Davis to get back. They need Smile Munden to get back. They need CJ Washington to get back. And they need EJ Lightsey to come in and ready to play. So I think it's certainly a situation where, Pop is their number 1 linebacker. And there's talented options there for 2, 3, 4. But it's all about kind of how is it going to shake out between those guys.
Tresman Marshall, Javon Bullard, and Nyland Green had Georgia's interceptions of the day. One of those was on a gadget play that Dominic Blaylock threw up there for grabs, but some positive signs of life there on the turnover front for the Dogs, having a nose for the football. And then who else did you have? Cedric Van Pran. All right, Kieris Jackson. That's the one. Leading receiver on the day. 4 catches for 107 yards.
Good to see him back to form, man. You kind of felt like he disappeared a little. I know he was dealing with some injury and that kind of thing. For me, that was kind of the big thing. You got to see some guys who've really struggled to be consistent or Kieris at one time led the team in receptions and receiving yards. So to see him back in that form, great to see. Tresman Marshall, a guy that you have seldom seen healthy out there running around and making plays for the Dogs. I thought that there were a couple of guys like that where it was just Don Blaylock. I mean, goodness gracious, everything that kid's been through. Regardless of what happens, moving into the fall, I'm excited that those kids had a chance to get out there and show what they could do in front of a Sanford Stadium crowd, and wish them all the health moving into this fall, because each one of those guys could be a big impact maker.
And then Zion Logue, 2 tackles, Nolan Smith, 4 tackles. Yeah, just a fun day, a fun G-Day game. We've all sat through G-Days where the final score was 13-7, and we didn't really come out of it feeling like we learned a lot. And I think if we learned anything this time around is that Georgia has a lot of capable playmakers on both sides of the ball. Which ones will separate themselves, and how much depth can Georgia, healthy depth, can the Dogs accrue either through the transfer portal or through guys just getting healthy between now and Oregon. Let's take a quick break. On the other side of this, we will talk about Amarius Mims and kind of put a bow on spring football 2022 before heading off into the great unknown of the Georgia football summer. We'll be right back. All right, guys, so all that spring ball talk in our rear view, the biggest story written by our own Palmer Toms from the past week, probably for this entire month when we go back and look at it, was the return of Amarius Mims from the transfer portal. What exactly happened that you're aware of to this point, Palmer?
Yeah, just speaking with people that know a little bit about the situation, I think it's one where Mims wanted to see what was out there, but ultimately those close to him, those that impacted his recruitment in the first place and are impacting it again now, his re-recruitment of sorts, they helped him realize, hey, let's remember what you fell in love with at Georgia in the first place, that opportunity to grow and develop against talented offensive linemen like you said, Wes, earlier. The battle between him and Warren McClendon every day in practice. Throw Broderick Jones in that category. Those guys are lining up against talented defensive linemen. Jalen Carter. I mean, you're not going to get many better. You're not going to get better if you're going against guys that aren't as good as you, that challenge you as a player. And there's not going to be many that offer a bigger challenge than Jalen Carter. So for Amarius Mims, I think those close to him realized and reminded him that, hey, you fell in love with Georgia for a reason. Here were those reasons. You wanted to come here and compete. You wanted to stay in state. I think that's a big factor here too. And that you wanted to, really develop as a football player under this coaching staff, under the direction of these coaches, and alongside some of these other players. This is the best place for you to develop into an NFL prospect, which, whether or not he had stayed at Georgia, we all would have thought that he is capable of being an NFL player down the road. Even without playing the first 2 seasons of his, college career, because again, it still doesn't look likely that he's headed for a starting position, and he didn't start last year. Even with that being the case, this guy's talented enough, has the raw tools that he could be a Sunday player after 3 years. And so I think those close to him reminded him, hey, here's this Georgia is the best place for you to grow as a football player. Ultimately, I think that's what helped Georgia win him back.
I mean, remember what Nick Saban said at that Touchdown Club meeting a couple weeks after the national championship, where he basically called a couple guys out for not being ready for the moment that helped Georgia win. And a lot of Georgia fans took that as Saban making excuses for, Jameson Williams being injured and Mechie being injured, but I didn't really take it that way at all. I think he was truly holding guys accountable for opportunities that could have been their moments to shine. And for one reason or another, they didn't. And look at how Georgia's offensive line situation shook out. I mean, Broderick Jones benefited from that shakeup in the national championship game. The same thing could happen for Mims. It is a cliche, but he could have his moments still this year, even though it doesn't look like it in April. Jake, what do you remember about Mims's recruitment that may have factored back in to him ultimately choosing Georgia again?
I think for Amarius, he was one of those guys, and, you like to think this is true of everybody, but the reality is that it's not, that this was a staff-wide effort, to reel a kid like this in. And so it's not like he was just close to Matt Luke, who, was his offensive line coach at the time. It's not like he was just connected to a singular guy. There were so many people around Amarius on the Georgia staff that he's close with, and in that locker room especially as well, that I think that those ended up being the key things. And like Palmer said, I think being at home really ended up being a major factor for him in the end. I feel like that was something that was very motivating when he sat back and thought about it. I've seen one of the things that I want to kind of get out there, and that's kind of been grinding my gears, is that people are saying, oh, he went out there to test the waters of NIL, and then Georgia kind of bounced back and maybe came with a bigger bag. I don't know if they did or didn't. I haven't seen anything that implies such being the case. But I don't think that it's the case that, if I were doling out NIL, I wouldn't do it for a guy who almost just left the school. So it's not like, I don't think that is a big factor in this situation. I think it's where the kid wanted to be first and foremost, and then I think other concerns secondary.
Yeah, I understand the already jaded perception of the NIL transfer portal combo being used that way because there's nothing to prevent a guy from doing it. Maybe that's why guys will, test those waters of the transfer portal and see what they can get. I'm not going to speculate about that. I have nothing, like you said, to indicate that that's what happened. But I think that's a good point. I mean, what kind of deals would try to bend over backwards for someone that doesn't necessarily want to be on the team at any given point?
Maybe. Maybe 2 men in a truck if you're interested. But I mean, I don't know. I can't. That just doesn't make sense to me. And I've seen that narrative kind of put out there a lot. Like I said, I can't say one way or another if that was or wasn't what happened. But to me, I can't see that ending up being the dividing factor, because I think Florida State or Miami could have matched anything that anybody was offering or wasn't offering, or, inducements are illegal to begin with. So I'm not even suggesting such a thing would be taking place. But if it were to happen.
Yeah, Miami kind of recruits itself, right? And never count out Athens, Georgia, is what I've taken away from this whole deal, which has been insane. The Florida State fallout of it and the Miami reaction of it. Not to take anything away from Palmer's reporting of the story, but I don't know that it would have blown up to the level that it did if not for the threefold factors of Georgia fans, Miami fans, and Florida State fans. The biggest irony of the whole driving force behind that story. It's all about the U. All right, guys. So before we wrap up here, any other big picture takeaways that we didn't touch on from the G-Day weekend? Some recruiting news, Jake, Palmer, any observations you had that we didn't get to?
Kind of quiet on the recruiting front for a G-Day, but I think that's more of a byproduct of you used to see the buildup of all these guys wanting to kind of arrive in Athens at the same time. Georgia's been hosting visitors all spring. I mean, they've had weekends that would rival past spring games in terms of, guys swinging by to see scrimmages or coming through the week even. So, maybe it fell a little flat. I still think the big news of the weekend when you're talking about recruiting was Justin Rhett, the former Notre Dame commit, gets on campus for his official visit and decommits from Notre Dame. During the visit, I don't know that anybody could – that was a bold move. You don't see that move pulled a lot, okay? You see normally the kid gets off the visit, he kind of gives it a day or two, maybe sloshes it around or does it at the end. But in the middle of it, oh boy, that was a strong indicator of I think how Justin Rhett feels about the Georgia Bulldogs. They're trending right now on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. I wrote a piece on it the other day. I feel Georgia's in a great spot with Rhett. Not sure when it's going to happen, and that may impact things too, but look for that to be a big key moving forward. I think that's a guy Georgia really covets in this 2023 class, and I think that the love's pretty reciprocal.
Well, and the commitment of Gabe Harris, too, that stood out to me. The fact, a talented pass rusher there from in-state, somebody that On3 is pretty high on. I thought that was big. Just seeing him in person, he looks like somebody capable of making plays within this Georgia defense and the pass rush. Just on paper, same size and weight as Robert Beal. That's not to say that he can't put on some more weight and maybe be a Trayvon Walker, more so than a Beal. To me, that was a talented, player that was a storyline as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gabe Harris, Georgia's prioritized him. And again, not to just be killing FSU today, but he was a former Florida State commit. So, Georgia just somehow beating Florida State in their spring game. I don't know how they even made that happen, but an inter-squad scrimmage and you get 2 wins over the Noles. Harris, a tremendous player. Go watch the film on him. I encourage people to go check that out. I think that he's a guy with a lot of speed, catches guys, runs guys down from the backside. And what I really love, and it pops off the screen when you watch the film, guys like this, who are just fiery, man. You can see when he gets up from making a tackle, he's got juice. He's an emotional leader. It looks like for his squad. I think guys like that translate over very well in the collegiate ranks. You got to have your locker room leaders, your on-field guys. It makes me think, watching his film kind of made me call back to the national championship game when Nakobe Dean was just absolutely railing on Channing Tindall. You need guys in there that are doing that kind of thing. I think Gabe Harris can be that kind of player for you.
No, and for me, as I turn the attention more to the team side of things, my biggest takeaway this spring is that Georgia, there's talent there. They certainly have a lot of leadership that is emerging, and this team appears ready to make another run at it. I'm not saying that I think that they're going to go win a second in a row, but I think that they're going to be competitive for one, because if you look at each of these positions up and down this roster, Georgia stacks up with about as good as anybody. And that's a testament to, Roos's side of things in the recruiting, what Kirby Smart has done on that trail, bringing in and just making it consistent. It wasn't one splash, one class splash. He's done it over year. And so, to me, that shows in the running backs. RBU is going to be okay. Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton, Dejan Edwards, all had a strong spring. We heard a lot about McIntosh and Milton, and I thought all three played very well in the spring game. They combined for 8 catches over 100 yards and a touchdown from Milton. The pass catchers, the depth may not be there.
Yeah, that wheel route was lethal for Milton and McIntosh.
Right. And so the pass catchers, not those running backs, are capable of helping them out too in the pass catching game. But they've also got those talented tight ends. I don't think it's a question of if Georgia's going to go 14 personnel. I think it's when and how quickly are they going to do that against Oregon? Because it would not surprise me to see Georgia line up 4 tight ends on the field with as much talent as they have in that room. They've got pass catchers capable of making an impact. Offensive line looks rebuilt and reloaded. Guys that have waited their turn are, and that's not to say that the offensive line that we saw on Saturday is going to be the offensive line we see in September. But I think that there's a strong chance. And if that's not the offensive line that we see, well, that means that somebody has emerged from below them and taken that spot from a Xavier Truss or a Devin Willock. That means that Tate Ratledge has come along back strong from his injury, that Warren Erickson, who missed Saturday as well, that he comes back strong, that a Dylan Fairchild or that an Amarius Mims comes on strong. And then defensively, just looking at that side of the football, again, it seems like, Kirby said this last week in a radio interview. This is a very similar situation that Georgia is facing in the secondary. They've got a lot of turnover there. And the secondary didn't look terribly strong last year in G-Day, and they didn't look great on this past Saturday either. And like you said earlier, Wes, I think a lot of that is because of the style of game that's played, the pressure that's put on them with the passing game. But again, Georgia has players there capable of making an impact. I think they're going to be able to do a lot of things up front with a defensive line that has a Jalen Carter, has a Zion Logue. Nazir Stackhouse looked good. We heard great things about Tramel Wildthower all spring long. He wasn't able to play, but in his place, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins looked really good.
Yep.
I think they're going to be able to do things up front with those guys, the outside linebackers of Robert Beal and Nolan Smith. Chaz Chambliss looked strong. Inside linebackers, we know that they're talented. It's just a matter of getting that talent, to gel a little bit. Pop looks great as that number 1 linebacker. Who's going to be the number 2 beside him? That front 7 still is very strong. They lose a ton there, but it's still very strong, and they're going to be capable of helping out that secondary as they grow and develop. And ultimately, I think it's a matter of is that secondary going to be ready to play late down the stretch when they get tested by a passing game in Tennessee, when they get tested by a passing game in Mississippi State, teams that are going to put the pressure on them. I think Oregon's probably going to put some pressure on them in the passing game, but I think Georgia's offense is capable. And if the defense doesn't look great in that game, I don't think it's a red flag for the entire season. I think the offense is going to be capable of helping them out in that game, and I think that ultimately the defense we see come November and September, or November and December, is going to be a lot different than the defense we see in September and October.
It's talent, but it's a lot of inexperienced talent, but it's still talent nonetheless. And Kirby told us that the spring is used to form and determine what the team's identity is. He told us that at the beginning of spring practice. His evaluation at the end of this one is that there's a lot more leadership readily available than he expected, that they almost wanted to emulate the guys that left, which I thought was an amazing sign. Kirby doesn't really mince words. He doesn't always tell us everything on his mind, but when he does talk, he doesn't try to misdirect us too much. And I think if there's one thing you want to take away from the spring that's a great sign for the Dogs, it's how much leadership Kirby saw and appreciates, and also how gritty he says he feels like this team can be. But I feel like those are two traits that you want to have when you're replacing all those first-round and overall NFL draft picks. So all in all, a pretty successful spring for Georgia football. All right, guys, enjoyed it as always.